In the wide, untamed stretches of Montana, some letters carry more than just words. They carry fate, and sometimes the wrong bride ends up in the right man's heart. No one ever expected much of Lydia Boone. Not as polished as her sisters, not as graceful as her mother. Just a small, quiet woman with calloused hands, a stubborn jaw, and a heart that refused to quit. When she boarded the westbound train out of Missouri, she wasn't chasing romance. She was chasing escape. Her mail-order bride contract wasn't even hers to begin with. But the woman it was meant for never showed. And so Lydia, plain and unassuming, stepped into a place she never intended to be. The people of Dry Hollow took one look at her and saw a mistake. But one rancher saw something else. Lydia Boone stepped off the train into the dust and heat of Dry Hollow, Montana. Boots crunching against the parched gravel like she just walked into a life that wasn't meant for her. The conductor tipped his hat politely, unaware, or maybe unwilling to admit, that she was stepping off into a mistake. She clutched a worn satchel in one hand and the crumpled envelope in the other. Her name wasn't even on the letter. It had been addressed to her cousin, Mary Ann, the real bride, the one with soft curls and even softer manners. But when Mary Ann ran off with the local dentist 2 days before departure, Lydia made a decision she never thought herself capable of. She took her cousin's place, and no one had to know. Except it turned out, everyone in Dry Hollow knew exactly who they were expecting, and Lydia Boone was most certainly not it. The station master squinted at her from under a weathered brim. "You the bride for Mr. Collier?" Lydia squared her shoulders. "Yes, sir." He gave her a once-over, his lips thinning into a line. "Didn't say nothing about you being smaller than expected." Lydia's face didn't flinch. She'd heard it all before. Too small, too quiet, too plain. It never mattered back in Missouri. She knew how to work a field and mend a fence better than most men. But here, with her long brown skirt brushing against unfamiliar ground and unfamiliar eyes watching her every move, she felt the weight of her borrowed name. A black wagon waited near the edge of the platform, 2 chestnut horses flicking their tails in the sunlight. A tall man stood beside it, lean, sharp-shouldered, with a worn Stetson shadowing his face. His arms were crossed over his chest, his jaw set like stone. Lydia recognized him immediately. Wade Collier, the man who had written letters, technically to Mary Ann, but they'd been read and reread by Lydia, late into the night, until the ink felt like a memory. His words were blunt, practical. He wanted a partner, not a princess, a woman who could ride, cook, and raise something that grew. She thought she could be that woman, but the moment Wade's eyes landed on her, she knew something was off. "You're not her," he said flatly. "No," Lydia admitted, stepping closer. "I'm not Mary Ann. I'm her cousin." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "So you're the one who's been writing me?" Lydia blinked. "Mary Ann never wrote those letters. I did. Every single one." There was a silence so thick, even the horses went quiet. Wade looked at her, really looked this time, and for a moment, something unreadable passed through his gaze. Then he shook his head once. "Get back on the train." The words hit her like a slap. Lydia swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "I came all this way. I have nowhere to go back to." "That's not my problem," he replied, already turning away. "I didn't sign up for a liar." Lydia's fingers curled tighter around her satchel strap. "No, you signed up for a wife who could work beside you, raise something on land that don't forgive weakness. You signed up for someone who doesn't quit." Wade paused. She pressed on, her voice steadier now. "I may not be the woman you expected, but I'm the one who read your words like they were gospel. I know how to butcher a hog, birth a foal, and fix a busted gate with nothing but wire and willpower. I don't need saving, Mr. Collier. I just need a chance." Wade didn't respond. Not at first. He climbed onto the wagon seat without looking at her, took the reins in one hand. Then, grudgingly, he tilted his head toward the empty space beside him. "You got 3 minutes. If you ain't up here by then, I'm leaving without you." Lydia climbed aboard before he even finished the sentence. The Collier Ranch looked nothing like Lydia imagined. No white picket fences or flowering porches like the novels promised. Just open dirt, sun-bleached wood, and fences that leaned like tired old men. The house was a squat, two-room structure tucked against a wind-blasted hill. A barn leaned hard to one side, half its roof missing. Chickens scattered when the wagon rolled in, clucking like they'd seen this story before, and didn't much like the ending. Wade didn't say a word as he tied off the horses and hopped down. Lydia stayed seated until he looked up at her, brow raised. "You waiting for me to carry you?" She climbed down without a sound. Dust kicked up around her hem, clinging to the Missouri-stitched lace on her dress. Marianne's lace. It didn't feel like hers. Inside, the house smelled of ash, dust, and something metallic. A rifle hung above the mantel. Beside it, a single photograph in a tarnished frame. A man and a woman standing apart like strangers. Neither was smiling. "That your parents?" she asked, nodding at the photo. "My brother and his wife," Wade said. Then nothing more. Lydia glanced around. No curtains, no warmth, just a hard table, two chairs, and a bed with a threadbare quilt folded at the end. A basin of water sat by the door, thick with silt. "I can fix the curtain rods," she said gently, "and maybe sew something up from feed sacks. Doesn't have to be pretty. Just something to soften the edges." Wade shrugged. "You think curtains will change this place?" "No," Lydia said, "but maybe I will." He studied her for a beat, then gestured to the second room. "You can sleep in there? It was my niece's room before they left." "Left?" "After my brother passed, his wife moved east with their girl. Couldn't stand the land." Lydia looked him in the eye. "Can you?" "I don't expect the land to love me back," Wade said, heading for the barn. "That's the difference." She unpacked in silence. Two dresses, one good pair of boots, and the silver thimble her mother gave her before dying of consumption. Not much, but it was hers. By supper, she had a fire going and cornbread in the skillet. When Wade walked in, eyebrows lifted at the smell, she just nodded toward the table. He didn't thank her, didn't compliment the food, just sat and ate like a man used to swallowing disappointment and calling it a meal. "I'll start patching the barn roof tomorrow," Lydia said between bites. "Rain's gonna do more damage if it finds a way in." Wade's fork paused in midair. "You fix roofs now?" "I fix what's broken," she answered simply, "even if it wasn't mine to begin with." That night, she lay in the small room with her eyes on the cracked ceiling. The wind moaned through the chinks in the boards, but she didn't shiver. She'd slept in worse. What kept her awake wasn't the cold. It was Wade's silence. In the morning, she found a hammer and rusted nails in the shed and climbed onto the barn roof before the sun was fully up. The boards were brittle, the shingles rotten, but she worked with methodical precision. She was halfway through when a sharp voice startled her. "You planning to fall and make me dig another grave on this land?" She looked down to see Wade squinting up at her, arms folded. "Planning to finish before noon if you stop distracting me," she called back. A smile ghosted across his face, barely there and gone again, before she could decide if it was real. By noon, she had finished the worst of the patching. Blisters formed on her palms, and her shoulders ached, but the roof no longer gaped like a wound. She climbed down the ladder and found Wade leaning against the fence, watching a calf struggle to stand. "You did good," he said without turning. It was the first kind word he'd given her. "Thank you," she said, peeling off her gloves. "I can mend the fencing tomorrow if you've got more wire." "I've got plenty," he said, then paused. "You really came out here just to help her?" "Marianne." "No," Lydia admitted. "I came out here because I didn't want to fade into the background anymore." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a mistake. The days rolled on, stubborn and dry, like the land itself. Lydia rose with the sun and slept when it sank, every inch of her skin darkening from the Montana sun. She mended fences, boiled linens, scrubbed floors with lye and lemon peel, and even coaxed fresh growth from a patch of earth behind the barn where nothing had grown in years. She didn't ask for thanks, and none came, but she noticed Wade no longer grumbled when he passed her in the fields. He didn't look through her anymore. Sometimes he even left the barn door propped open so she wouldn't have to wrestle it herself. On the fifth morning, she found a pair of worn leather gloves sitting on the porch rail, stitched small enough to fit her hands. She didn't ask, and Wade didn't say. But when he passed her on his way to tend the herd, he said, "They were my sisters." "Thank you," she answered simply, sliding them on. They fit like a second skin. That evening, a windstorm hit, sudden and mean. The sky went dark before dinner, and the dust came in sharp, whipping up from the east like it had a personal grudge. Lydia ran to pull the sheets off the line, but the wind caught the corner of one, lifting it like a sail. She lost her grip and stumbled straight into Wade, who had come sprinting from the barn to help. His arms caught her hard, not romantically, not tenderly, just solid, grounded, like the only thing between her and the storm. They stood there, both breathing hard, the sheet tangled between them. Her fingers were in his shirt collar. His hand was still on her waist. "You all right?" he asked, voice tight. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They stayed like that a second too long before the wind reminded them where they were. They gathered the laundry in silence, brushing dirt and embarrassment off as best they could. Inside, she cooked by lantern light, the storm howling outside. Wade set the table. She didn't ask him to. Over dinner, something shifted. "What brought you all the way out here, really?" he asked, slicing into a sweet potato with more gentleness than he used on most people. Lydia looked up from her plate. "Same thing that keeps most people here, I think." "What's that?" "Pain," she said softly, "and the stubborn hope that maybe something better's on the other side of it." Wade looked like he might ask more, but he just nodded, like he understood that some stories came in pieces. Later that week, they made the long ride into Copper Hollow for supplies. It was Lydia's first time in town since arriving. The general store bustled with gossip and flower dust. Women stared. Men looked her over like a loose card in a stacked deck. "Is that the Collier girl?" someone whispered as they walked past the post office. "Number, that's the mail order, sister," came the reply, sharp with judgment. Lydia kept her chin high. Wade didn't say anything, but when they passed the saloon and a ranch hand called out, "Where'd you order her from, Montgomery?" Wade stopped short. He turned, slow and deliberate. "You want to try saying that again?" The man raised both hands, laughing like it was a joke. But Wade wasn't laughing. His eyes were stone. The tension snapped like a bootlace when Lydia stepped in. "He wouldn't dare," she said, calm and clear, "because it takes more courage to build something than to mock it from the sidelines." The man looked between them and backed off. Wade tipped his hat to her as they walked on. "Didn't need to do that." "Neither did you," she said, "but I appreciated it." They rode home in silence, but something between them felt stronger, sturdier. That night she found Wade sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of juniper wood. It looked like the beginnings of a flower. "For the window box," he said when he caught her looking. "I thought you said the land doesn't give back." He shrugged. "You've proven me wrong before." She sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. "I'm not my sister," she said after a long moment. "I didn't come out here to make someone happy who never wanted me." Wade's knife paused. "I came because I wanted to build a life that wasn't handed down like second-best china. And maybe I hoped someone out here might look at me and see more than what I'm not." Wade looked at her, really looked. "I've seen that since day one." Lydia blinked, caught off guard. "I just didn't know how to say it without messing it up," he added quietly. She smiled, not because it was romantic, not yet, but because it was honest. And honesty, out here, was rarer than rainfall. The summer deepened into something golden and dusty, the kind of heat that pressed down on the valley like a prayer you couldn't quite shake. Lydia worked through it without complaint. She knew the rhythm now, the way Wade liked the tack cleaned, which hens laid the best eggs, how to check the eastern fence before the deer tangled in it. Wade noticed. He didn't say much, but she caught it in the little things. The bucket of cool water left by the porch after her garden work. The porch swing freshly fixed, its chain no longer squeaking. A sprig of mint left on the windowsill next to the cracked tea tin she favored. She never said thank you out loud. She didn't have to. One morning, Wade found her kneeling by the tomato vines she'd coaxed from the dry earth. He crouched beside her, quiet. "You really made something grow," he said, half wonder, half disbelief. Lydia didn't look up. "Sometimes it just takes someone believing something can." He studied her a while, then said, You remind me of my mother." She glanced up, startled. "She was small like you," he continued, "but she never let that stop her from running a household and breaking horses. Had a spine made of wire and words that could level a grown man. She built this ranch with my father, one fence post at a time. Never let the land tell her no." Lydia sat back on her heels. "She sounds remarkable." "She was," Wade said, voice roughened by memory. "She passed 10 years back, right after Ellie turned 20. Your sister?" He nodded. "Ellie was the sweet one. Thought she could fix the world with her smile. Thought marrying a stranger from Boston was her big adventure." Lydia waited. "She wrote me once from St. Louis," Wade went on. "Said the man never showed. Said she was scared. 2 weeks later, I got the telegram from the Pinkertons. Train accident. No body to bury." "I'm so sorry," Lydia whispered. He looked away, jaw tight. "You're not her, and I shouldn't have treated you like you were." "No," Lydia said gently, "but I came in her place. That wasn't nothing." Wade stared out at the field. "It was everything. But I didn't know how to look at you and not see her, until I did. And now I can't stop seeing you." His eyes met hers then, steady as a summer sky. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But something passed between them, something unspoken and solid. That night, they sat on the porch, drinking iced coffee and watching the stars blink into place. "You ever miss Boston?" Wade asked, breaking the quiet. Lydia swirled her cup. "Sometimes the sound of carriage wheels on cobblestone, the sea breeze." He nodded. "But you wouldn't go back." She shook her head. "That life never really fit. I just didn't know it until I left it behind." Wade tilted his chair back. "You fit here." The words were simple, but Lydia felt them settle deep. The next morning, trouble arrived in the form of a man with a mustache slick as oil and a gold pocket watch that caught the sun like it was showing off. Clayton Morin, banker turned land baron, rode up with 2 men and a grin like a snake in Sunday clothes. "Mr. Montgomery, Trump," he called. "We need to talk about your loan renewal." Wade stepped off the porch, wariness etched into his face. "Thought we had till the end of the season." "You did," Clayton said smoothly, "but I've come into some new information. Your sister's name is still on the contract, and her passing left some questions of legal standing." Wade's fist clenched. "That's low, even for you." "Just business," Clayton said with mock innocence. "But it seems unless there's a blood relation or legal wife still residing here, well, the bank may call in the loan early." Lydia stepped forward. "So it's not about standing, it's about leverage." Clayton's eyes flicked to her with distaste. "And who might you be?" Lydia didn't flinch. "The woman who's been keeping this place running while you've been circling like a buzzard." Wade stepped between them. "You best leave." "I'll return tomorrow," Clayton said with a tip of his hat, "with papers." When he left, the silence was thick. Lydia finally said, "You could lose the ranch, couldn't you?" Wade rubbed the back of his neck. "I took a loan 5 years back to keep the cattle fed through drought. Thought I'd paid enough down that it wasn't an issue. But he'll twist anything to get control." He didn't deny it. That night, they didn't sit on the porch. They worked by lantern light, going through every ledger, note, and receipt. Lydia's sharp mind caught patterns Wade had missed. Proof that his mother had contributed capital, that the barn had been rebuilt with her funds, that Lydia's improvements had increased output. She made notes, wrote a statement, organized the documents like a general preparing for war. At one point, Wade looked up from the papers. "You don't have to do this." "I know," she said, "but I want to." And Wade realized then there was no going back, not for either of them. The dawn came pale and windless, the kind of quiet morning that meant a storm was gathering somewhere, even if not in the sky. Lydia Boone had always known how to prepare for storms, emotional, social, financial. She buttoned her blouse with steady fingers, hair pinned tight. The ledger was under her arm, her notes tucked inside like sharpened arrows. Wade waited for her on the porch, his hat low over his brow. He looked like he hadn't slept, and from the tension in his jaw, he probably hadn't. "You don't have to come." She brushed past him, her tone steady. "You're not walking into that alone." When Clayton Morin arrived, he didn't come quietly. His buggy was polished, horses gleaming like spilled ink. He strutted up the steps of the courthouse like he already owned the deed to every ranch from here to the southern ridge. Inside, the courtroom was mostly empty, just the county clerk, a young judge named Hollis Trent, and two ranch hands who'd wandered in to see what the fuss was about. Wade's shoulders were stiff beneath his coat. Lydia could feel the weight of the land on his back, even if no one else could see it. "Mr. Montgomery," the judge said, voice mild, "Mr. Morin claims your sister's passing complicates the standing of your land title due to her remaining listed on the original lien document. Care to respond?" Clayton leaned back, all smug and satisfied, like he'd already won. Lydia stood. "Your Honor, if I may." The judge blinked. "And you are?" "Lydia Boone, resident of the Montgomery Ranch, contractually employed and co-manager of livestock and resources. I also keep the books." Clayton scoffed. "A bookkeeper? Really, Judge, are we entertaining theatrics now?" Judge Trent raised a hand. "She may proceed." Lydia opened the ledger slowly, letting the silence hang. "These records show that not only has Mr. Montgomery been maintaining the property solely for the past 5 years, but that his mother, Catherine Montgomery, was the primary financier of the ranch infrastructure. As such, even prior to Ellie Montgomery's mail-order bride arrangement, legal dominion rested with the family legacy, not the marriage contract." The judge leaned forward. "Can you prove that?" "I can," Lydia said, placing a folder on the desk. "Invoices, receipts, and statements dating back to 1873. Additionally, I've prepared notarized affidavits from 2 neighboring landowners who witnessed the improvements under Mr. Montgomery's leadership." Clayton's jaw twitched. "And one more thing," Lydia added, meeting the judge's eye. "If Mr. Morin is leveraging inheritance law, he must acknowledge Mr. Montgomery's right to transfer ownership through marriage." The judge blinked. "He's not married." Lydia's heart thudded, but her voice, it didn't shake. "Not yet." The courtroom stilled. Wade's head turned sharply toward her, eyes wide. Lydia didn't break gaze. "But the intention is there. And if you'd allow it, Your Honor, I'd like to make that intention legally binding today." Judge Trent coughed into his fist. "You're proposing marriage?" Lydia nodded, calm as ever. "I am." Clayton practically jumped from his chair. "This is absurd." "No," Wade said, voice low but sure. "This is mine." He turned to Lydia. "You're sure?" She looked at him, at the man who had seen her not as Ellie's replacement or an Eastern inconvenience, but as the fierce, competent woman she was. "I am if you are." He stepped forward. "Judge, do it. Marry us. Right now." "Do you have a license?" the judge asked, startled. Clayton sputtered. "This is a farce." But the clerk leaned forward. "They filed one 2 days ago." Lydia looked at Wade, stunned. "You did?" "Didn't know if I'd use it," he murmured. "But I knew I wanted the option." The judge raised his hands. "Then I suppose, let's make it official." There was no music, no flowers, just dry wood benches, dust motes dancing in sunlight, and 2 hands clasped tight. The vows were simple, the rings borrowed. When Judge Trent declared them husband and wife, Lydia felt something settle in her chest like the last puzzle piece falling into place. Clayton stood, pale with fury. "This changes nothing." Judge Trent folded his hands. "Actually, it changes everything. Mrs. Montgomery is now a co-owner. The lien stands. Your petition is denied." Clayton stormed out, boots clacking like gunfire. Outside, Wade and Lydia stood on the steps in the dry morning light. He cleared his throat. "So, we're married," she smiled. "We are. You sure you don't want something fancier, a dress, a supper?" "I'd rather have the land and the man who stood beside me when it counted." He grinned then. "You're something, Lydia Boone." "Lydia Montgomery now." He reached for her hand. "Let's go home, wife." They rode back in the wagon, hands twined, the papers tucked beside them like a promise. The ranch waited ahead, fences to mend, calves to feed, and a legacy reborn not in tradition, but in choice. The first Sunday after their courthouse wedding dawned clear and golden, with low clouds stretching across the Montana horizon like soft-spun wool. The Montgomery Ranch was unusually quiet for a working day. Frank had quietly postponed most of the chores, and Martha had disappeared into the kitchen before the rooster even crowed. Lydia stood on the porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands, staring across the pasture where a mist curled around the hooves of the cattle like something magical. For the first time since arriving in Copper Ridge, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. "You keep looking like that," Wade said, coming up behind her with a grin, "and I'm going to start thinking you like it here." Lydia turned. "I do." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers closing around hers. "You're not just saying that because we burned Clayton Morin in open court." "That was a bonus," she admitted, lips twitching into a smile. He leaned against the porch railing beside her, both of them quiet for a long moment. "Ellie's things," he said at last. "They're still in the big bedroom. I haven't touched them." Lydia's breath caught. "I don't want to replace her, Wade." "I know," he turned to her. "But you should know. She never really made it hers. She was still figuring it out when she got sick. Spent more time in the guest room than she ever did in that bed. Said the house didn't feel right yet." Lydia swallowed hard. "And now?" He smiled gently. "Now it does." Later that day, after the morning chores had been wrapped up faster than Lydia thought possible, thanks in part to a ranch full of men eager to see the boss's new wife in action, Martha declared lunch a celebration, not a meal. Lydia sat at the long farmhouse table with Wade at her side, Frank across from them, and Martha flitting in and out like a whirlwind of cinnamon and authority. "So," Martha said, sliding a plate of warm biscuits toward Lydia, "what's next for the Montgomerys?" Lydia raised an eyebrow. "Besides fighting off lawsuits and overcooked gossip?" Wade chuckled. "We've been thinking about expanding the herd. And," Lydia added carefully, "starting a breeding program." "For horses," Frank whistled. "You sure?" Lydia nodded. "We've got the space, and I've got ideas. Breeds from Kentucky and Virginia that could mix well with our western stock. Lighter, faster, better suited for hilly terrain." Martha gave her an approving look. "I like a woman with a plan." Wade squeezed her hand under the table. "It's not just that." Lydia glanced sideways at him. "She's been writing letters," he continued, "to folks back east, women who might come west if they had a place to land that wasn't built on measuring waistlines and pedigree." Martha stopped mid-step. "You mean she wants to start a new kind of mail-order bride network?" Wade said. Lydia nodded. "One where the women are valued for their skills and strength, not just their family name or height or how well they look in lace." Frank rubbed his chin. "You might be onto something." Wade looked at Lydia. "Tell him what you named it." She smiled a little bashfully. "The Boone Ledger." Martha blinked. "Like your family?" Lydia nodded. "It's a name that's been underestimated before. I want it to mean something different now." Frank chuckled. "You realize this will make some folks mighty uncomfortable." "I hope so," Lydia said. Comfort never changed anything. By the time the sun started its slow descent behind the buttes, Lydia had moved Ellie's trunk into the guest room, not out of disrespect, but as a quiet gesture, acknowledging what came before while making room for something new. That night, Wade found her at the desk in the study, reading through Ellie's old journals. "You okay?" he asked softly. Lydia looked up, a lamp casting warm light over her face. She was scared. "She never said." "She wrote it." Lydia closed the journal gently. "She didn't want to disappoint you. She just wasn't sure this life was meant for her." Wade sank into the chair across from her. "You ever feel that?" She met his eyes. "Every day. But I came anyway." They were quiet again, the only sound the faint creak of the wind through the shutters. "I'm glad you did," he said finally. "Me too." She stood, crossing the room to him. "And tomorrow, we start building something new." He took her hand, rising to meet her. "No," he said, "we already have." Outside, the night stretched wide and deep, filled with stars sharp enough to cut. The kind of sky that promised storms and sunrises, droughts and abundance. Lydia Boone Montgomery stood at its edge, no longer waiting to be measured by someone else's yardstick. She had chosen her place, and more importantly, she had made it hers. Lydia's story shows us that love, purpose, and belonging often come in the most unexpected forms, and sometimes in the most underestimated packages. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt dismissed because of how you looked, only to later prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it today.